Cinco de Mayo, an annual celebration held on May 5th to commemorate Mexico's victory over the Second French Empire at the Battle of Puebla in 1862. While many around the world celebrate this date with Mexican food, music, and festivities, few understand the true historical significance behind this important day. Today, we'll explore the real story of Cinco de Mayo, its historical context, and how it evolved from a military victory to a widespread cultural celebration. To understand Cinco de Mayo, we must travel back to Mexico in the early 1860s. The nation was struggling through a tumultuous period in its history. Having achieved independence from Spain in 1821, Mexico spent the following decades facing numerous challenges, including the Mexican-American War of 1846-1848, which resulted in the loss of significant territory to the United States, and the Reform War from 1858 to 1861, a civil conflict between liberals and conservatives that left the country politically divided and economically devastated. By 1861, Mexico was effectively bankrupt. The newly elected president, Benito Juárez, a Zapotec indigenous lawyer and politician who rose to become Mexico's first indigenous president, faced an impossible situation. The national treasury contained virtually nothing, and Mexico had accumulated substantial debts to several European powers, including Spain, Britain, and France. In a desperate move to give his country time to recover, Juárez issued a moratorium on all foreign debt payments for a period of 2 years, promising to resume them once Mexico's financial situation improved. This decision, while necessary for Mexico's survival, provoked an immediate reaction from European creditors. In December 1861, Spanish, British, and French forces arrived at Veracruz, Mexico's primary port city, to demand repayment. After negotiations, Britain and Spain reached an agreement with the Juárez government and withdrew their forces. France, however, had ulterior motives beyond simply collecting debt. Emperor Napoleon III, nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, harbored ambitious plans to establish a French empire in the Americas. He saw Mexico's financial crisis as the perfect opportunity to gain a foothold in North America. The United States, which might normally have intervened under the Monroe Doctrine that opposed European colonization in the Americas, was preoccupied with its own civil war that had begun in 1861. The timing seemed perfect for Napoleon's imperial aspirations. The French emperor had another motivation as well. He had been encouraged by Mexican conservatives and members of the Catholic Church who had opposed Juárez's liberal reforms. These Mexican elites hoped that European intervention would help restore their traditional privileges and power that had been diminished under Juárez's liberal policies. In early 1862, approximately 6,000 well-trained and well-equipped French troops under the command of General Charles de Laurences began their march from Veracruz toward Mexico City. The French were considered to have the finest army in the world. At that time, having not been defeated in battle for nearly 50 years, they were confident of quick victory, especially given that they outnumbered and outgunned the Mexican forces they would face. Standing in their path was the city of Puebla, about 100 miles east of Mexico City. President Juárez entrusted the defense of Puebla to General Ignacio Zaragoza, a 33-year-old commander born in what is now Texas. Zaragoza had roughly 2,000 men at his disposal, a mix of professional soldiers and poorly equipped indigenous volunteers, many armed with antiquated rifles and machetes. Some were even farmers who brought their farming tools as weapons. By all conventional military wisdom, the Mexican forces were destined for defeat. The French planned to take Puebla quickly before proceeding to Mexico City to overthrow the Juárez government. They were so confident of victory that General Laurences reportedly remarked, "We are so superior to the Mexicans in race, organization, discipline, morality, and refinement of sensibilities that I tell your excellency that from this moment, at the head of our 6,000 brave soldiers, I am the master of Mexico." On the morning of May 5th, 1862, the French forces began their assault on Puebla. General Zaragoza had positioned his troops at two heavily fortified positions, the forts of Guadalupe and Loreto, which sat atop hills overlooking the city. The Mexican strategy was to force the French to attack uphill over difficult terrain. The French began with an artillery bombardment, attempting to weaken the Mexican positions before their infantry advanced. However, the Mexican forts were well constructed and withstood the barrage. General Laurences, still confident in his superior forces, ordered a frontal assault. What the French didn't anticipate was how the terrain would work against them. As the French forces marched uphill toward the Mexican positions, they became easy targets for the defenders. Additionally, an unexpected rainstorm had turned the ground muddy, further hampering the French advance. Nevertheless, the French pressed forward with 3 assault columns. The fighting was intense. The French made several attempts to take the forts, each time being repulsed by determined Mexican resistance. One particularly dramatic moment came when French French cavalry attempted to flank the Mexican positions, charging up the muddy slopes toward Fort Guadalupe. Zaragoza responded by dispatching his own cavalry unit, which managed to repel the French horsemen. By late afternoon, after suffering significant casualties and making no headway against the Mexican defenses, General Lorenzez ordered a retreat. The French withdrew to their starting positions, leaving behind approximately 500 dead and wounded soldiers. The Mexican forces had suffered about 100 casualties. Against all odds, Mexico had defeated what was considered the premier military force in the world at that time. General Zaragoza sent a brief message to President Juárez that has become famous in Mexican history. Las armas nacionales se han cubierto de gloria. The national arms have been covered with glory. While the victory at Puebla on May 5th was significant, it's important to understand that it did not end the French intervention in Mexico. Embarrassed by the defeat, Napoleon III sent 30,000 additional troops to Mexico. This reinforced French army eventually captured Puebla in 1863 and then Mexico City, forcing President Juárez and his government to retreat to the northern regions of the country. The French established the Second Mexican Empire and installed Archduke Maximilian of Habsburg, an Austrian noble, as Emperor Maximilian III of Mexico. However, Juárez and his supporters continued to resist, waging a guerrilla campaign against the French occupation. By 1866, with the American Civil War concluded, the United States began providing more direct support to Juárez's forces. Simultaneously, growing problems in Europe and the rising power of Prussia made Napoleon III reconsider his Mexican adventure. French troops were withdrawn in 1866, leaving Emperor Maximilian vulnerable. Republican forces captured him in 1867. And despite international pleas for clemency, Maximilian was executed by firing squad on June 19, 1867, effectively ending the Second Mexican Empire. While the Battle of Puebla ultimately did not prevent the French occupation, it became a powerful symbol of Mexican resistance against foreign intervention. It demonstrated that Mexico, despite being outmanned and outgunned, could stand up to a European power. The victory provided a much-needed morale boost during a difficult period in Mexican history and became a source of national pride. Tragically, General Zaragoza did not live to see the final victory against the French. He died of typhoid fever just 4 months after the Battle of Puebla at the age of 33. In his honor, the city of Puebla was renamed Puebla de Zaragoza, a name it retains to this day. In Mexico today, Cinco de Mayo is not a federal holiday, but it is observed as a voluntary day of celebration, particularly in the state of Puebla. The most elaborate commemoration takes place in the city of Puebla itself, where a month of activities culminates in a large military parade and a recreation of the famous battle. Thousands of people dressed as Mexican and French soldiers reenact the conflict, ending with the Mexican victory celebration. It's worth noting that in Mexico, Cinco de Mayo is not as widely celebrated as Independence Day on September 16th, which commemorates the beginning of Mexico's War of Independence from Spain in 1810. Many tourists and foreigners often confuse these two important dates in Mexican history. The significance of Cinco de Mayo in Mexico is primarily as a symbol of Mexican resistance to foreign domination. It represents a moment when the Mexican people, despite overwhelming odds, successfully defended their sovereignty. President Benito Juárez, who led Mexico during this turbulent period, remains one of the country's most revered historical figures. His famous quote, "Entre los individuos, como entre las naciones, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Among individuals, as among nations, respect for the rights of others is peace," continues to resonate in Mexican political discourse. While Cinco de Mayo has specific historical significance in Mexico, its evolution in the United States follows a different and fascinating trajectory. The celebration of Cinco de Mayo in the US began among Mexican-American communities in California, shortly after the original battle in 1862. News of the Mexican victory quickly spread to Mexican miners in California, who reportedly responded with celebratory gunfire, music, and speeches. These early commemorations were primarily expressions of solidarity with their homeland's resistance against European imperialism. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Cinco de Mayo celebrations continued as a way for Mexican-American communities to maintain connections to their cultural heritage while forging new identities in the United States. These observances typically included music, dancing, food, and patriotic speeches that honored both Mexican and American national symbols. The celebration gained significant momentum during the Chicano movement of the 1960s and 1970s. Chicano activists embraced Cinco de Mayo Mayo as a symbol of resistance and self-determination that resonated with their own struggles for civil rights and social justice. The holiday provided a platform to celebrate Mexican heritage and increase visibility for Mexican-American communities that had often been marginalized in American society. Campus organizations such as MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de mi Altisid, Aztlán, organized Cinco de Mayo events at colleges and universities, which helped spread awareness of the holiday beyond Mexican-American communities. These events typically emphasized educational aspects of Mexican history and culture alongside the festivities. By the 1980s and 1990s, Cinco de Mayo began its transformation into a more mainstream American celebration. Corporate interests, particularly beer companies and restaurant chains, recognized the marketing potential of the holiday. Companies like Corona, Dos Equis, and Taco Bell launched major advertising campaigns tied to Cinco de Mayo, effectively transforming it into an opportunity to sell Mexican products and experiences to the broader American public. This commercialization dramatically increased the holiday's visibility, but also divorced it somewhat from its historical roots. In contemporary America, Cinco de Mayo has become one of the country's most popular cultural celebrations, characterized by Mexican-themed parties featuring margaritas, tacos, sombreros, and mariachi music. Major cities across the United States host Cinco de Mayo festivals that attract thousands of attendees from diverse backgrounds. It's worth noting that this commercialized version of Cinco de Mayo has created some controversy. Critics argue that many celebrations reduce Mexican culture to stereotypes and encourage excessive alcohol consumption under the guise of cultural appreciation. Others point out that most Americans who celebrate the holiday have little knowledge of its historical significance, often mistakenly believing it commemorates Mexican independence. However, proponents argue that even commercialized celebrations create opportunities for cultural exchange and increase interest in authentic Mexican history and traditions. Many Cinco de Mayo events in the United States now include educational components alongside the festivities, and some Mexican-American. Communities have worked to reclaim the holiday by organizing more historically informed commemorations. Whether in Mexico or the United States, Cinco de Mayo celebrations today feature rich cultural traditions that showcase Mexico's vibrant heritage. Traditional music plays a central role, particularly mariachi, which features trumpets, violins, guitars, and guitarrons, a large acoustic bass. Regional folk dances such as the Jarabe Tapatio, often called the Mexican hat dance, are performed in colorful traditional costumes. Food is, of course, an essential element of any Cinco de Mayo celebration. In Puebla, the day is often marked by serving mole poblano, a complex sauce made with chocolate, chili peppers, and numerous spices that is considered one of Mexico's national dishes. Other traditional foods include chiles en nogada, stuffed poblano peppers in walnut sauce, chalupas, thick corn tortillas topped with meat, salsa, and onions, and various regional specialties. In both countries, the holiday is also marked by artistic expressions, including paper crafts, papel picado, flower arrangements, and the creation of vibrant decorations in the green, white, and red colors of the Mexican flag. Many celebrations include displays of traditional Mexican arts and crafts, from intricate beadwork to clay pottery and textile arts. For families, Cinco de Mayo provides an opportunity to pass cultural traditions to younger generations through storytelling, cooking traditional recipes together, and participating in community celebrations. Many schools in areas with significant Mexican-American populations use the holiday as an opportunity for educational programs about Mexican history and culture. The contrast between Cinco de Mayo celebrations in Mexico and the United States highlights interesting questions about cultural exchange, identity, and the evolution of traditions across borders. In Mexico, the day is primarily a commemoration of a specific historical event with particular significance to national identity. In the United States, it has evolved into something broader, a celebration of Mexican-American heritage and, for many non-Mexicans, an appreciation, however simplified, of Mexican culture. Historians note that this divergence isn't unusual. Cultural celebrations often evolve differently when transplanted to new environments, responding to the needs and circumstances of immigrant communities and the broader society. For Mexican Americans, Cinco de Mayo provides a visible platform to celebrate their heritage in a country where they have often faced marginalization. Some cultural commentators have pointed out that the commercialization of Cinco de Mayo in the United States follows a pattern seen with other ethnic celebrations, such as St. Patrick's Patrick's Day, which has similarly evolved from a specific historical commemoration to a broader cultural celebration, often disconnected from its origins. This process reflects both the challenges and opportunities of cultural exchange in a diverse society. Despite these differences, Cinco de Mayo celebrations in both countries share fundamental elements: pride in Mexican identity, the commemoration of resistance against overwhelming odds, and the joy of communal celebration through food, music, and dance. At their best, these celebrations foster greater cross-cultural understanding and appreciation. The Battle of Puebla, commemorated each year on Cinco de Mayo, represents more than just a military victory. It embodies the enduring Mexican spirit of resistance against domination, of dignity in the face of adversity, and of national pride that transcends social divisions. General Zaragoza's unlikely victory with his outnumbered forces serves as a powerful metaphor for overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges. In today's world, where discussions about cultural appropriation, immigration, and border relations often dominate conversations between Mexico and the United States, Cinco de Mayo offers a unique window into the complex, intertwined histories of these neighboring nations. The holiday reminds us how historical events can be interpreted and reinterpreted across generations and borders, taking on new meanings while maintaining connections to their origin. Whether celebrated with a solemn military parade in Puebla or a festive community gathering in an American city, Cinco de Mayo continues to resonate because it speaks to universal themes: the struggle for self-determination, pride in cultural identity, and the human capacity to persevere against overwhelming odds. So, as we conclude our exploration of this significant holiday, we invite you to look beyond the surface of Cinco de Mayo celebrations to appreciate the rich historical legacy and cultural significance they represent. The next time you observe Cinco de Mayo, remember the courage displayed on that battlefield in Puebla and the complex journey this commemoration has taken across time and borders. ¡Viva México! ¡Viva el Cinco de Mayo!